that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me get my slides going, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about prescription opioid abuse amongst the teen population with Martin Red. He is with the DEA, and he'll be joining us in a little bit as we begin the presentation. I do want to remind you of what is our next webinar. This one will be on human trafficking, and it'll be on Tuesday, July 30th from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We have Amy Leonards. She is the founder and director of Free to Hope. I just encourage you, go ahead, check out her website, and we'll have her website is freetohope.org to learn more, but she does really great work with helping people that are trying to make an impact on the human trafficking, but also for people that are trying to leave it. Maybe they've gotten into it and there is a way out. So she does a great job. And we will be discussing how this affects teens, social media usage, and where the traffickers are finding our youth. For those of you that are new to Operation Parent, we are a parent-driven organization. We provide education resources to those raising teens and preteens. We're really all about parents helping parents. We are parents here at Operation Parent, and our focus is to provide you the best information that's out there with additional resources, and just to kind of give you the heads up on a lot of the things that are going on, and how to help educate your children. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Michelle Massey, my assistant, who is going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about the GoToWebinar panel.
Great. Good job, Mary Beth, and thanks so much. This is Michelle Massey, as Mary Beth said, and I'm on the program development team here at Operation Parent. I'm the proud parent of a middle schooler and now a high schooler, which is hard to say, but the truth in our family, they're growing up fast. I just want to take you through the system so you know how to use the technology that we're using today. On your webinar control panel, you're going to see an orange tab with an arrow. This tab allows you to open and minimize the screen. If you wish to view your screen without the control panel, just click on that orange tab and minimize it. For now, though, please click on the orange arrow and open up your control panel and you'll view all the features with me. Many of you just utilize the question feature, so we know that that's working well. And that's where we're going to hear from you today. You saw that the top panel there shows any questions that you've already posted, and below that is another light blue panel where you can type your questions and send them directly to us. So they come privately to Mary Beth and I, and so we're going to encourage questions. We love questions, and you can post them at any time during the webinar. We're going to prompt you at the end of the webinar, but you do not have to wait until that point to go ahead and send Martin a question. All questions are going to be answered at the end of the presentation. Just keep in mind that we might go over the 60-minute mark with the question and answer segment. So if you need to leave the webinar, please do so and understand that you'll get the recording with the remainder of the webinar. We've got some awesome handouts for you all today. We have a copy of today's PowerPoint, which is titled The Prescription Drug Abuse Among Teens. We have a handout titled Growing Up Drug-Free. Also some information on proper disposal of prescription medication, and then an excellent resource on prescription for disaster and how teens misuse. Just double click on those handouts to begin the download process. The handouts will only be available to you while we were in session. Once the webinar has ended and the session is closed, you will not be able to download from this location. However, just keep in mind, we just sent you an email also containing the handouts. So you can download in either place, but if you want to be safe and do it while you're on the webinar, that's a good course of action. We are recording this presentation and the recording will be sent to you tomorrow. That's a question that we often get when we've gone off live webinar, is when will we get the recording? So I just want to reiterate that you will get the email tomorrow afternoon with the recording, because a lot of folks want to re-listen to what they heard today, and we certainly understand that, and you will have an opportunity to do so. There will also be a short survey sent to you directly after the webinar. It will take about 2 minutes to complete, And we would certainly appreciate the feedback because we're developing an amazing webinar program here, and your feedback helps us to continue to do that. Now it is my distinct pleasure to turn it over to Martin Rudd, who's going to take us through the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Thank you, Michelle. Before I start and introduce myself, I want to make sure that I send out a big thank you to Operation Parent. They have such a great organization here. And I've known about Operation Parent for quite a while, many years, but this is about the first time that I've had to actually work with them, and I do appreciate it. As Mary Beth said, my name is Martin Redd. I am the Diversion Program Manager for the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, in the Louisville Field Division. And what that means is I am a program manager over all of the diversion investigators and diversion group supervisors that deal in Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia. And what we do is we monitor and evaluate all of the legal pharmaceuticals that come in and around the 3 states, which is the Louisville Field Division. So to go into a little bit more of what we're going to do today, I wanted to talk to you about some of the highlights, why the division started, the best practices, the top programs that we have. There's a lot of initiatives that DEA gets involved with, and we'll go over those towards the end of the presentation. First, I want to tell you, and I know this doesn't really play into the people from Ohio and New Mexico and all over the country that's tuning in. I did hear David from South Carolina. He's already got a special place in my heart, unless he's a Clemson Tiger fan, and he not so much. But I wanted to let you know, basically, within the division, within the Louisville Field Division, what we do is there's a lot of pharmacies within the 3 states. We've got about 3,100 plus pharmacies that we deal with, over 47,000 practitioners, and oddly enough, the treatment centers, which I think there should be a little bit more of, within the 3 states, there's 48 treatment centers in the states. As you probably are aware, Louisville, Kentucky, Charleston, West Virginia, even Tennessee are very, very high in the overdose death rates throughout the nation. And that's what I say is we've got a lot of initiatives that we're doing, but it's kind of a all hands issue to try to combat the opioid epidemic and where we are. So some of the learning objectives, we've got 3 main learning objectives that we want to go over today. The first one, gain a greater understanding of prescription drug diversion and the way teens are obtaining these drugs. We'll recognize the signs of prescription drug abuse and addiction and understand how DEA is addressing the problem. And I want to go into that a little bit more before we move on. First of all, we want to learn what diversion is and how it impacts our society. The other thing is we want to look at signs of addiction, but we want to look at how to combat these issues, whether you're a parent or a teacher or a federal agency. We need to have some tools in our toolkit to be able to understand how to deal with what teens are doing and what's going on in our communities. So looking at what prescription drug diversion is, basically it's legitimately made controlled substances that are diverted from their lawful purpose into illicit traffic. That's what drug diversion is. Now, before we go forward, let me give you some examples here. Legally, what we do, we monitor the legal avenues of how controlled substances get shifted throughout the country, whether they are importing hydrocodone into the U.S. That's an importation. If they're dispensing methadone at a narcotic treatment center, which is a methadone clinic, a lot of people know these as different things. They're called narcotic treatment programs. If you're a dentist that's administering controlled substances in the office, a pharmacist who dispenses controlled substances through legitimate areas such as prescriptions, those are all legal. Now, if you get into the non-legal side, or as the federal regulations and laws read, not within the legitimate course of professional practice, you start talking about diversion as it relates to practitioner diversion, where a practitioner may issue a illegitimate prescription for sex. That practitioner may have some type of addiction issue. If you're looking at pharmacy thefts, usually pharmacy techs will divert controlled substances, and we have known to investigate pharmacists as well. The medicine cabinets, and this is a huge deal with our teen population and older population, is all the controlled substances that we tend to not get rid of and leave it in the medicine cabinets. That's a huge area for diversion. So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about as we move through this. And I've got a couple of examples about cases that we've worked in Wichita, Kansas, Louisville, Kentucky, Owensboro. So we'll go through those as well. So signs of practitioner diversion. If we look at this, practitioner diversion, and you could have patient diversion or practitioner diversion. Patients that travel a great distance to see a practitioner, that's a great telltale sign, or a red flag as we call it, where the patients may be doctor shopping. These patients will also look for a relaxed practitioner, or a practitioner that may be near retirement, that doesn't have his guard up or her guard up as much anymore, not using all the tools to fight doctor shoppers. Doctors, practitioners, they have in almost every state, Missouri not yet, but a prescription monitoring program that most states mandate these practitioners to look at, to monitor their patients, to make sure they're not doctor shopping or diverting pills as they get them from the doctors. If a patient comes in and claims to have a textbook illness, which requires a specific medication, or that patient dictates to that practitioner that they need a certain drug or a certain strength of a certain drug, that's usually a telltale sign or a red flag that that's a patient seeking certain medication. Now, if you get into the practitioner who receives other forms of compensation for narcotic prescriptions, like I said, some want to have sex and they'll issue a prescription, and in return they get sex from the patient, or drugs. They may write a prescription to a patient and tell the patient to go to a certain pharmacy, get the 90 pills filled, and bring half back to me. That's a classic addiction issue. or guns, anything for prescriptions that a practitioner can issue. And this is, again, for illegitimate purposes. This isn't for legitimate medical illnesses. Ignores signs of abuse, track marks on arms, not conducting medical exams, a full medical exam. That's usually a sign of practitioner diversion. So here in Paducah, Kentucky, some time ago, we investigated a doctor, Dr. Troy Nelson, for, this isn't what Dr. Nelson was charged with, but one of the patients came forward and said that he was having sex with a specific group of patients. In return, he would issue the prescriptions to those patients. Now, when we went in there to do a investigation, we looked at the records that he was supposed to keep, and there were numerous record-keeping issues which he was indicted for and sentenced to 1 year in jail and a $10,000 fine for record-keeping violations. Also, when you look at fraudulent prescriptions, that's also a very big issue of diversion. Some of the characteristics for prescription fraud or diversion of prescriptions is when a practitioner issues a legitimate prescription to a patient. That patient may seek to alter the prescription some way, alter the patient's address to where it won't come back on a prescription monitoring database. That patient may alter the quantity. A lot of times doctors will write the number 30 for the quantity, and a patient may put a 1 in front of the 30 to make it 130 pills instead of 30 pills. We always tell practitioners to get in the habit of, if you're going to write 30, write the letter 30 out. So you've got the number 30 and it written out, whether in parentheses or next to the number. That always works well. A lot of times we have seen where it's different colored ink. The doctor may be writing in blue ink. Well, when the patient gets it home, the patient will pick up a black colored ink pen and alter the prescription. That should be a telltale sign for these pharmacists to understand, to look at all of this stuff a little bit better, because they're the pharmacist, and I don't know if we can tell who's on there as a pharmacist, but the pharmacists are basically the last line of defense before those pills are issued and out into our communities. Another way that pills are diverted are pill mills. They have really slowed down a lot. Florida used to have a unbelievable amount of pill mills and rogue pharmacies. New legislation in that area, I know, slowed it considerably. But we had a Dr. Steven Schneider, who's still in prison. This was a 2010 conviction. It was about a 4-year investigation. Dr. Schneider saw up to about 100 patients a day, which any practitioners out there know that that's almost impossible. Sometimes he was seeing patients in his office miraculously while he was at his vacation home in Mexico, and would bill insurance companies, Medicare and Medicaid, for those visits that he never saw. So at the end of it, Dr. Schneider was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His wife, Linda Schneider, was convicted to 33 years, sentenced for 33 years because of her role. He actually went to trial. There were 70 plus people that he was ultimately responsible for killing, and he went to trial for 68 of the deaths. And we got a conviction of that. Now, before we go forward, I just know that recently, and this is a coincidence, in Wichita, Kansas, there was a Stephen Henson, 57 years old, who was a doctor, like I said, in Wichita. He was convicted of excessive prescribing of oxycodone, hydrocodone, alprazolam, and methadone for cash. At least one death due to mixing the alprazolam and methadone together, and he was actually sentenced to life. So the prosecutors, whether it be state or federal prosecutors, they're starting to learn these diversion cases a lot better. And where we were getting 10 or 20 years out of these, now there's enough to where they can seek life, which is great if somebody's doing something wrong. Now, I also want to preface this by saying that we don't seek out practitioners to investigate. If you took nationwide, there's probably less than 1% of the practitioner population that is under investigation. So we don't seek out these issues. They just usually fall in our lap because of some type of healthcare crime or over deaths. Some other type of diversion cases deals with pharmacy diversion. Again, usually pharmacy techs are the culprits to stealing a lot of pills or shorting prescriptions and stealing the pills for their personal use. This came in Owensboro, Kentucky, where we investigated Mayfair Pharmacy. Diversion does a lot of criminal work and a lot of civil work, but our main goal is to make sure that all of these DEA registrants, everybody that has a DEA registration, whether it be a practitioner or a methadone clinic or a pharmacy, they have to maintain records and inventories of what comes into their place and what goes out of their place. So if it's a pharmacy that we're talking about, those pharmacy records will show kind of like a checkbook of all the pills that came in, all the pills that are dispensed, and what's on hand. In this case with Mayfair Pharmacy, there was a 140,000 plus hydrocodone pill shortage that we found out, where the pharmacy tech was actually diverting 1,000 count quantities of pills, and the pharmacist was actually diverting Robitussin cough syrup with codeine. So the pharmacy paid $75,000 to settle the federal lawsuit. Unfortunately, both of the pharmacists that owned the pharmacy died in the investigation and were never criminally charged. Moving on to illegal internet pharmacies, and this is not the legal, this is illegal internet pharmacies. Everybody should know not to use a website to purchase drugs unless the person obtained a valid prescription from a valid licensed medical practitioner who has conducted an in-person medical evaluation. It's very important. The website is operating in accordance with the Ryan-Haight Act, and we're going to go into that in just a second. But if you, a lot of times in the past, probably about 5 or 10 or so years ago, maybe a little bit longer, it used to be where you could go onto an internet site or Google hydrocodone, and hundreds, if not thousands of websites would come up. You didn't have to have a medical evaluation. You didn't have to have x-rays. A pharmacist sitting on his couch or her couch somewhere in the nation would hit the enter button to fill your prescription and be paid every time that person hit the enter button. So illegal internet pharmacies, you really have to be careful for. And these internet pharmacies introduced the Ryan-Haight Act. and we're going to go over that. Ryan Haight was actually a 18-year-old high school honors student, straight A's. He was an athlete. He died in 2001 from an overdose of Vicodin purchased from a rogue online pharmacy. To further that, his mother, finding Ryan lifeless in his bed, contacted the authorities. DEA got involved and found that he had overdosed on Vicodin, which was ordered and prescribed from a doctor that Ryan never saw. It was also delivered by a pharmacist that nobody knew. Both are serving federal prison time at this time. But that's what entered the Ryan Haight Act of 2008. This amended the Controlled Substance Act, or the CSA, the Controlled Substances Import and Export Act, and added several new provisions to prevent the illegal distribution and dispensing of controlled substances by means of the internet. So as we go on, we look at more of what diversion is, and it brings us to the medicine cabinets. Medicine cabinets are the #1 source for prescription drugs that are abused. We've got some statistics to go along with that. More than half of the teens, 73%. Now these are nationwide statistics. These aren't state by state, but nationwide, more than half the teens, 73%, indicate that it's easy to get prescription drugs from home. That's probably higher because if you don't throw away the drugs in a safe and legal way, then they're just going to be sitting there in the medicine cabinet for friends of the teens or teens to get to use illegally. Half of the parents, 55%, say anyone can access their medicine cabinet. And almost 4 in 10 teens, 38%, who have misused or abused a prescription drug obtained it from home. It's awfully high. So when you look at the next set of statistics, pain reliever from friends or relatives, it's a little staggering. You can read this, but this statistic shows more than 48% of persons 12 and older. Now that's a little hard for me to say, because when we're talking about prescription drug abuse and addiction with prescriptions, legitimately made prescriptions, we're talking about 12 years and older kids. Over 48% of these kids and older got pills, whether paid for or free. That's not the issue. But they have the mindset that these pills are safer than the street drugs like cocaine, meth, marijuana, which marijuana is still federally illegal. But 40%, over 40%, got the pain reliever from a friend or relative, probably from the medicine cabinet, and almost 9% bought the pain reliever from a friend or relative. And again, whether it's free or they paid for it, they're still getting the drugs that we're not safeguarding or getting rid of when we could. In a little bit, I'm going to talk to you about the National Drug Take Back and the numbers that we're collecting from across the board all over the United States. But the bigger part of this, moving on, is the misuse of prescription drugs is more prevalent than the use of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, MDMA, and PCP combined. Very staggering to me. So I show you this picture of the University of Kentucky. I know if you're not in Kentucky, you could care less about the Wildcat Stadium. And David, I think you're gonna, if you're still online, if you're still in the same line of thinking, I have a hard time being a South Carolina fan, showing this as well. But I do this to show you the relevance and the magnitude of all of these people. Capacity of 61,000 people in a stadium this large, which brings us to the next statistic. In 2016, 63,632 drug overdose deaths. It's very staggering to me. So if you go back and look at all of those people in UK's stadium, 61,000 capacity, the overdose rate in 2016 far surpassed that. You know, you're looking at one death every 8 minutes, approximately 174 persons per day. 42,000 of those were due to opioids. And if you compare that to our next statistic in 2017, it jumped from 63,000 total drug overdose deaths to 72,300. Now this equates to one death every 7 minutes, approximately 198 per day. So if you really look at this, and of course that number jumped from 42,000 in 2016 to 49,000 in 2017. So I'm going to leave it right here for a second, and I want to kind of break this down a little bit further. I mean, we saw the validity of UK Stadium and it being 61,000 pills. We looked at how it surpassed in 2016 that capacity of that stadium by about 2,500 people and even more in 2017. But if you look at with 63,000 plus deaths in 2016 and 72,000 plus deaths in 2017, I want to ask all of the attendees, are we socially accepting that pills are an okay way to die? Now I say this knowing the answer, that it's not an okay way to die, okay? But I want to put this a little bit more in perspective. If I asked this question, if 72,000 people in 2017 died from heart medication, I bet you the heart medication manufacturer would recall that drug and rectify that issue. Or if 72,000 people in 2017 died from a defective tire, would that tire company have a recall on that specific tire? So if you think about that, I hope that everybody listening and all of the initiatives and outreach that we do and the educational awareness, I hope everybody takes a step back and realizes that seven minutes, a death every 7 minutes is not okay, or approximately 198 deaths per day is not okay. And I think that's probably why certain states are taking action to rectify or stop the opioid issue in their area, like Oklahoma, $270 million lawsuit settlement with Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin. And there's over 2,000 more similar lawsuits that are doing just like Oklahoma did. So we look at why, a little bit more in depth of why teens abuse prescription medication. And this is, if somebody could weigh in and tell us the exact answer, we'd probably be a lot better off. Operation Parent could probably shut down their doors and DEA could go home and never fight the fight on opioids anymore. But as it stands, we look at why teens abuse prescription medication, and there's so many different reasons. I think most of it is curiosity, or they want to get in. It's the trend. They want to do what their friends are doing. They want to get high. You know, many prescription drugs, marijuana and alcohol. Alcohol and marijuana used as a gateway drug that lead into other drugs. You know, these prescription drugs can make you feel good. They make you feel better. People that are these teens that are depressed or having a hard time coping with bullying or any of the trends that are going on in the elementary, middle school, and high schools now, they think this is a way out. A lot of times this leads to overdose deaths because they don't know how much to take. They don't know how much their tolerance level can stand. Another thing is to help concentrate doing schoolwork. ADHD medicine is a prime example of that. Or to perform better in sports. A lot of these high school kids that are trying to get a ticket to college, they may use controlled substances like steroids to make sure they get bigger and better and stronger than the next person that they're trying to beat out to get that high school scholarship or that college scholarship. Curiosity is a big one. They just want to know how it makes them feel. uh, or just a daring behavior. They just want to see what it does. There's so many different ways that teens abuse these drugs. Like I said, it starts with usually a gateway drug, which is marijuana, sometimes marijuana and alcohol. These going back to the previous issue of why teens abuse the prescription medicine. Teens have done what's called a Skittles party or a rainbow party, and they will go take prescription pills from the medicine cabinets, not knowing what it is and not targeting any type of certain medication. It could be a heart medication, or it could be an Oxycontin from Purdue Pharma, or it could be a methadone pill for cancer patients, something. But what their initiation is to this party, or this Skittles party, is to bring a handful of pills, put it in a bowl with other pills, and obviously different colored pills. You have that Skittle effect or the rainbow effect. And throughout the night, as these high schoolers or even middle schoolers will go to the bowl and pick up an unknown pill and take it. They don't know what the level of strength is. They don't know what the pill is. They don't know if it's going to uh, contradict something in their body. So it's a very bad issue, and we need to make sure that we definitely rid the cabinets and the medicine cabinets of all unused or expired prescription medicine. So talking about student athletes, high school student athletes can be especially vulnerable to prescription painkillers, and there's a lot of different reasons. And I said one of them. If a person was in a high school sport and they want to get bigger and better and stronger than the next person that they're in line with for a college scholarship, maybe they're probably going to experiment with a controlled substance such as steroids. Some other possible reasons for misuse is pain relief. If you're like me that's overdone it because I'm older and I was out in the yard doing yard work because I'm not 20 years old anymore, they do it for pain relief. They don't want to be sidelined and have this illness or this illness that's going to make them not perform on the field. So they take it for pain relief. An eagerness to return to the field after an injury, or a belief that such medication is safe because they're prescribed by a doctor. And that's what gets into these teens, these middle schoolers' minds. They think they're safer to take a pill. It's safer than going out on the street corner and trying to buy marijuana, because they hear that the marijuana is laced with cocaine. The marijuana is now laced with fentanyl, which is a huge killer. And we'll go over the strengths of that in a minute. But they know that these pills, they come from a manufacturer. They're prescribed by a doctor who's very well educated, and they're in a pharmacy that's a sterile place. And they get these pills because a pharmacist thinks that it's okay to dispense a doctor's order for those pills. So commonly misused prescription drugs, we'll go over those, opioids, depressants, stimulants. If you're talking about opioids, you're talking about controlled substances like Schedule II drugs like hydrocodone or Vicodin. You're talking about Robitussin with codeine in it. That's a misuse. That's abused, not highly abused, but it's somewhat abused and very low addictive with the codeine cough syrup. Depressants, usually referred to as Valium or Xanax. That's usually a Schedule III drug, not as addictive and not as abused as a Schedule II drug, but still addictive and abused. And stimulants, which is like Adderall or a Ritalin type ADHD drug. So just to give you a feel of kind of what we're talking about with hydrocodone, what it looks like, you can see in the picture there to the right. Usually hydrocodone, it was a Schedule III drug. DEA, a lot of other federal agencies, they saw the potential of abuse and the potential for addiction. So what they did is we lowered or either hired, whatever way you're thinking of this, from a Schedule III drug to a Schedule II drug. It takes more to get this pill prescribed. There's higher security requirements, so people can't just break into a pharmacy and steal it off the shelf. This has to be locked up. It's usually used as a pain relief, sometimes a cough suppressant if it's liquid, used in something like Robitussin or a cough syrup like that. Some of the overdose effects, it's slow and shallow breathing, clammy skin, confusion, convulsions, coma, and it could absolutely result in death. And we've seen it time and time again. The benzodiazepines, usually used as a sedative, a hypnotic, muscle relaxant. Sometimes it's to treat anxiety. It used some adverse effects as slurred speech, nausea, vomiting, low blood pressure, slowed breathing. It's starting to sound like a commercial, but there's a lot of effects using these benzodiazepines. Some slang names that all the parents and teachers should be well versed in, and this is another thing that I'm going to talk about towards the end, is know how your child or your student is talking. There's a lot of code names for things. You see these slang names for these benzos and downers, nerve pills, tranks. You have to understand how these kids are talking to understand exactly what they're doing. So another is amphetamines. ADHD is one of these. It's taken to produce a sense of exhilaration, enhance self-esteem. A lot of kids are being prescribed this by medical doctors. There's obviously some overdose effects when taken at large doses. They may cause dizziness, tremors, headache, flushed skin, all kind of things, vomiting, some of the same things that other controlled substance, and this is a controlled substance, will make you feel. It could lead to death. It could lead to overdose issues. And a lot of slang names, again, bennies, black beauties, crank, ice. There's a ton of different names. So when you look at all of these together, and a lot of doctors shouldn't, but they are prescribing what's known today is a Trinity cocktail. This Trinity cocktail usually is a regimen which includes at least one of each of opioid, benzos, or a muscle relaxant. Usually used in pill mills. You'll see this many times in pill mills where a doctor that is prescribing outside the legitimate course of professional practice, that person will usually do this Trinity cocktail for everybody that comes into the office. They'll do the same strength, the same type of drug. They won't use like any other factors involved to treat each and every person that comes into the office. It's just a one drug, one strength for all type rubber stamp. So when combined, it causes respiratory depression. Most results in severe overdose issues and death. So I know this is a little outside of what we're talking about with the prescription drug and controlled substances. Heroin is a controlled substance, but it's a Schedule I controlled substance. And that's what kind of is the bottom of the barrel almost when people get in that circle of addiction. They, start out with some gateway drug. They'll get into a hydrocodone or an oxycontin, and then when they can't afford those pills anymore, they can get a much larger high at a reduced rate, get going into heroin. So looking at fentanyl, and this is not the medical fentanyl that you get when you're in the hospital or cancer patients. This is fentanyl coming over from China. Usually it's synthetic opioid. It's 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin. You can see the pictures on the right of the screen there. And carfentanil, which is 100 times more powerful than fentanyl and 10,000 times more powerful than morphine. Now, what the picture is actually showing is the lethal doses compared to a dime. So you can see carfentanil wouldn't even cover the ear in that dime, and the fentanyl usually would cover about the head of a penny. So we look at signs of prescription drug addiction. We've gone into a little bit about this, but if you look at the circle of addiction, it goes into talking about the marijuana and the alcohol, which I've already talked about is the gateway drug, or something that gets the tolerance level started. Once that tolerance level builds up to that marijuana or the drinking, people want to have that first high again, so they move into like a Lortab or a Vicodin, some type of hydrocodone narcotic prescription. It takes a little bit, it takes less of the drug to get that same high. Once that you build that tolerance level to that hydrocodone, people go into an oxycodone or an oxycontin. Now, granted that an oxycontin is $80 per milligram, so not a lot of people, especially not a lot of middle school and high school kids, can sustain a $80 a milligram pill, because one 80 milligram pill is 80 bucks, just about. But what they'll do is after that, they usually revert to heroin or something illegal like that. You can get it at probably $10 a bag. The high is a lot better than the oxycontin, or especially the lower dose hydrocodone. So we look at possible signs of prescription drug addiction. I'm not going to read through all of these, but usually you'll see problems at school, physical signs. They may change their friends. They may jump from a great group of kids to not so great group of kids that cut school. They don't do their homework. They have money issues. There's drug paraphernalia in the in the rooms. You as parents have to check these rooms and don't be a friend, be a parent, and make sure that you are aware of all of these signs, the school, problems at school, the physical signs, bloodshot eyes, if they're dressing differently, that's all signs of what we have to look at. So these are some of the objects related to opioid abuse. And we kind of move into what we can do as an agency, or what you can do as parents or practitioners or pharmacists or people out there that have controlled substance authority. You want to make sure that we talk to your patients or talk to our teens or students, and we want to use the time such as dinner table discussions to talk to kids, see what's going on at school, what are the trends. Don't make this such a taboo subject. Make sure that it's out in the open, and then being informed. Be proactive in the issues. Use educational websites to understand the trends on social media and how kids speak code or with text or with photos. We have to know this. So some of the DEA initiatives that I was talking about earlier, and I'm going to go through these a little quicker, but everybody's got these handouts. Some of the DEA initiatives, we look at enforcement activities where we deal with street drugs and drug traffickers. We look at the initiatives that Diversion does with prescription opioids and medical professions. The community outreach we do a lot of. We touch a lot of people. We get a lot of awareness out with the educational awareness. As you can see with this next slide, the statistic, just in Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia, we have had approximately 655 diversion outreach engagements, reaching over 57,000 members of the public, which is phenomenal. The diversion outreach coordinator, Emily Cormier, does a wonderful job with her proactiveness and getting us out there into these 3 states, as Operation Parent does. Wonderful organization. And then we move into the National Drug Take Back. Those of you that don't know this need to get on the DEA website and look at what we do, what DEA does as far as the take back. We make sure we partner up with the local law enforcement agencies that actually go out on Saturdays twice a year for about 4 hours and collect these unused, expired prescription pills. And I can show you some statistics, and I think I can say that these are positive statistics of 17 national take back engagements that we've done. You can see this last one we did with April 27th, 2019. Whatever state you're in, obviously I'm in Kentucky right now. So, the Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia, you can look at those. Ohio, I know there was a lot of people from Ohio. South Carolina, you've got 11,000, almost 12,000 pounds of pills that we're taking in. Now, this was one day. This was April 27th for 4 hours. Texas, anybody from Texas, you can see the state collected 92,000 pounds of prescription drugs. Now, you ask, I get this question a lot, how much of that 92,000 pounds in Texas were actually controlled substances? We speculate anywhere from 10 to 12%. But regardless, if you're cleaning out your medicine cabinet, whatever it is, it takes it out of the hands of these teens that could get it to sell or take to school and abuse. So this next slide, we look at all 17 totals, the 17 times that we have done a take back. You know, we're looking at over 11 million pounds, over 5 tons of pills. Texas, you can see, you know, after the 17 times, you weighed in at 912,000 pounds. California, you're over 1 million, which is great. Again, within all this is 10 to 12% usually of controlled substances. Everything else is heart medication and vitamins or whatever is expired or unused. But I sure do appreciate everybody getting all of those out of the medicine cabinet. And it's one of the greatest initiatives I think that DEA does twice a year. So as we go through the next 3 slides, I want to highlight, well, we're going to highlight some of the additional websites for education and awareness that everybody can log on to, get a lot of materials, a lot of statistics. But while we're going through these, I again want to thank Operation Parent for the opportunity to be able to speak to so many attendees today. And with that said, that probably brings us to questions.
All right, and thank you, Martin, so much. If you have a question, now's the time to go ahead and type it in. I just wanted to go real quick over these last few slides. In your slide handout, you have these slides. So again, if you've not downloaded these handouts in the live event, please look for an email from me, Mary Beth Uberti, or it's Mary Beth at Operation Parent. .org, and you will see a handout, the handouts attached. But it's Get Smart About Drugs is one site to go to. And then we attach this handout, Prescription for Disaster. This is another handout you have. And then also the Growing Up Drug Free is another handout we attached. And Martin and the DEA were kind enough to provide us with those handouts. So with that, again, please go ahead and post questions. I'm going to go through the last few slides and then we'll hit all the questions. So again, just a reminder, the next webinar is on human trafficking. Again, on Tuesday, July 30th from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register right now at operationparent.org. If you do not see it on our homepage, which I don't think it's on the homepage as of yet, there is an icon up in the right-hand side of a calendar. Click on that and you will see it listed in our calendar of events. I believe by tomorrow it should be on our homepage. Different ways to stay informed with Operation Parent is please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can sign up for our e-newsletter. You just go to our homepage and you can do that right there on our homepage. Purchase a parent handbook. I'll show that in a few moments. You can do that also online. You can purchase our elementary or middle school handbooks. You can host a community presentation. I go out into the community and do presentations on anything in the social media world, alcohol, marijuana, and then also on helping your child cope with fears and worries, all different topics. You can find that on our website and just continue to attend our future webinars. For those of you that are interested, these are our parent handbooks. We have a elementary version, talks about topics such as cyberbullying, coping skills, friendships. Again, it's available in English, Spanish, and Christian edition at $5.99 each. A middle and high school edition is more robust. It has over 40 topics: social media world, drugs, alcohol, the mental health issues, legal issues, dating violence, a variety of topics. It provides parents, caregivers with information on trends, warning signs. Where do I go for more help? How would I know this is what's going on? So I encourage you to go to our website. If you want to order a large quantity, please just go into our website. You can put a query in and we'll get back to you. Okay, with that, I'm going to take a look here and see what we have in the way of questions. And hold on. Okay, what about Imodium? Imodium. Are you familiar with that drug?
I am familiar with it, but
Okay,
not a controlled substance.
not a controlled substance. Okay. Do you see a day that doctors will not be able to write prescriptions? going to the electronic version would defeat the counterfeiting of prescriptions.
Well, I'll tell you, DEA is really pushing the electronic prescriptions. It obviously will deter a lot of the fraudulent writing in a
Yeah.
1 instead of just a 30 quantity. So now you got 130. It'll deter all that. But we are pushing doctors to get more electronic. Now there's some that don't work off of computers,
Hmm.
so they're still going to have the written
Yeah.
prescriptions.
Yeah. Okay. Um, okay. Then I'm curious, why did North Dakota have no participation in the 17th National Take Back Day?
You know, that's a good question. Um,
I noticed that too.
yeah, and I think that was about the only time. I think they've weighed in a little bit, uh, but yeah, that one, I
Hmm.
don't know. Maybe the few law enforcement agencies that do participate, maybe they just didn't that time. I'm not sure. You
Okay.
know, we're getting more and more law enforcement activity and participation. Prospect, Kentucky has never done it in 16 times, and then this last time they had something at Kroger. So, you know,
Okay.
we're recruiting more and more people every time we do this, and the numbers keep going up. They increase every time we do it.
Okay. Well, then here's a question I have for you. When it is not drug take back time, those 2 times of the year, where do people get rid of the prescriptions if they're cleaning it out after a death of a loved one and they have a bag? I know I went through that with the death of my mom with cancer drugs and with painkillers she had. Where do you take them at that moment to get
Yeah,
them disposed of?
that great question. I can tell you that the 2 times that we aren't doing it in the 4 hours on a Saturday, a lot. I don't want to say most all, but a lot. The vast majority of law enforcement agencies now have what's called a drop box in their lobby. I know in
Mhm.
Kentucky, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, Louisville Metro, they all have drop boxes where you can walk into the lobby, drop the drugs, pill bottles and all, into the drop box and walk away. No questions asked.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go, everybody. Just so you know, check with your police department for a drop box. And I see here. I'm getting a lot of comments there. Hold on. I just lost my spot here. Uh, so what is the, wait a minute. What is the best thing a parent can do to help make sure their kid never starts using drugs?
One more time.
What is the best thing a parent can do to help make sure their kid never starts using drugs?
Oh gosh, there's so many little,
Yeah.
you know, initial things that parents can do. One is to make sure, like I said earlier, make sure to use downtime to educate your kids. I know I have had a daughter, or I have a daughter. I've had 2 daughters. One, and I say that because she just recently left the house, so I'm an empty nester. But I would talk to her. I don't even know. I don't want to say every day. It seems like I infused it in her every day, but I told her stuff. Oh, you know, hey, have you ever heard of this fentanyl? No. Well, you know, let me tell you, even though you don't want to hear it, at least
Mhm.
you'll have the knowledge of it. Or if we went to have a Starbucks date, well, we would go and talk over just life trends. She would usually be more open with me to say, hey, look, did you know this was going on in school? Of course, I'd follow that up by, well, don't ever do that because here's the repercussions. A lot of
Mhm.
the teens, kids, they don't know the repercussions of these drugs. So if you make them aware that there's a long-term issues that could come out of this, so use the time wisely, be proactive, and uh, interact with your kid, and let them know the long-term, short-term effects, what's going on, why they shouldn't take it. When I go into schools now, the kids know about drugs, and they know probably at least what I know about drugs. I tell them how it's going to affect them. They already know what it is and what they want to
Mhm.
take. I tell them how it's going to change or alter their life. So I mean, I would say the outreach, the educational awareness of things that they don't know, like football players, they don't know the repercussions of steroids. They know what it's good for.
Right.
So I think that that initial awareness and being open with them is probably the first line of defense. And
Okay.
and let me throw this in as well. I mean, if you have kids that you suspect uh, there's some type of curiosity, search their room, look under the bed, look through their drawers. If it makes you feel more comfortable when they're not there, then do it behind their back. It's your house, it's your room. You have to keep them safe, and that's part of it. Know the telephone number, passwords, all that stuff. Um, there's a lot of things that you can do to be proactive.
It's something else to do. What I do, which is not always easy, is please be awake when they come home. um, Especially once they have their own cars and they're driving and you lose that time in the car together. You kind of
Hmm.
lose that extra time where you can talk to them or have a conversation and they don't have to look you in the face, which is what driving in a car is great for, but you lose that. So keep in mind, when they go out for the evening, set a curfew, a reasonable curfew based upon their age. And in some counties across the United States, there are curfews. There's
Hmm.
curfews for those 16 and under. Pay attention to the curfew, but be awake when they walk in that door. Don't let them, honestly, don't get into the habit where they're walking in and you're sound asleep. And because then you're missing that opportunity, you want to give them every opportunity to say no. And one of the opportunities to say no is I got a parent who's waiting up for me. Matter of fact, my parent will sit there and ask me, how was the party? And talk with me. And, honestly, you're doing it just to make sure. And honestly, hug them, smell them. Bill Oliver always
That's
jokes,
right.
pop them one, have a big hug, get them to exhale, smell their breath. And if you're so inclined and so curious, drug test them. But that's the extreme. But my point is, give them other reasons to say no. Give them the reason of my parent's going to be home when I wake up. I have a curfew. Can't, sorry, like to be able to party, can't do it, but also to help them set a goal for their future. Talk about what do they want? Because if they can see a future for themselves, it gives them another reason to say no. And that's what you're really working on also too, beyond just the education, which is so crucial, but is to give them other reasons too. I just learned at a conference, kids are overdosing and being hospitalized on Imodium. Okay, wow. That might be something to look up, both of us. Yeah.
That would, I mean, that's something that we don't really follow, because if it's the same drug, it's not a controlled substance, so DEA wouldn't get involved.
Wow, never heard of that before, but I'll take a look too. Let's see. It says our police department has permanent boxes that people can use during regular hours to drop off. Yeah, clean out those medicine cabinets, every place you have them.
Hmm.
Uh,
I can tell you in Kentucky alone, there's approximately 160 drop boxes in law enforcement's, sheriff's office, police departments around the state. So
okay.
I, a lot of these departments, they get grants, so it's, the $2,000 or $3,000 for the box isn't coming out of their budget, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. What about access to DETTERA bags? DETT, I don't know what that ERA. Do you know what those?
I I've heard of it, but I don't
Okay.
think we deal with that at all.
What is it? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Okay, okay. All right. And why don't pharmacies have drug drop boxes?
Well,
Good
some
question.
do. It is a great question. Some do. We not too long ago, several years back, we allowed the pharmacies, retail or chain pharmacies, to become what's called a collector, and that's a addition to their normal chain or retail pharmacy DEA registration, and they would be able to have a big box in their pharmacy to where people could do the same thing, go into the pharmacy, drop whatever they wanted to pill wise into the box, and what that pharmacy would then have to do is inventory that bag when it's full and keep records, keep inventories. Some pharmacies just don't want to get into that extra work,
Mm,
so that's why a lot of them don't. I want to say I queried this not too long ago, and I want to say that, oh gosh, I don't want to throw a number out, but it was very, very low. I want to say maybe a couple of hundred, maybe, across the nation that
hmm,
actually had these collectors.
okay. I have a comment in New Jersey. We have a few different websites that list drop boxes around the different counties. The drop boxes are usually open during regular business hours as they are police departments. You have a few responding with the same thing. Yeah. How do I get in touch with your office to implement a training for parents and church leaders in the context of Hispanic churches in Tennessee, if possible? Do you do trainings out in the community?
We do
Do
a
you have a
lot.
Hispanic, Spanish
Um,
speaking?
we do not. That's a good question. But we have.
Okay. Okay. That was Alexis. Alexis, the contact information is on the handout. So if you want to drop an email, or you can drop one to me and I'll forward it on, marybeth at operationparent.org, and I'll
Where
pass it on.
where is she located?
It just says Tennessee.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know where in Tennessee.
So we would be able to accommodate it because we have Spanish speakers,
Okay.
um, but not as far as assigned to outreach.
Okay.
So we would be able to do that.
Okay, great. Okay, I got an answer for the, I'm not pronouncing it, I'm sure, to Deterra. Packets allow for in-home disposal of medications. They are like a Ziploc bag that have a carbon core. You can place the drugs in them and then add water, seal back up, throw in the trash. We're using them here in Idaho to keep drugs from getting into the wrong hands. Interesting. I had
There
not heard of those before.
there's a lot of stuff out there on the for people to buy. A lot of pharmacies have this same stuff. What it does is it makes the controlled substance inoperable.
Okay.
You can't pull the controlled substance back out of it. It's kind of like if you don't want to spend the money for that. And again, there's all kind of different products, and we don't deal with any
Mhm.
of them. But if you wanted to dissolve your pills, if you've got 30 or 40 pills,
Mhm.
you can dissolve them in water, pour them into kitty litter or coffee grounds, and then throw those in the trash.
Okay.
That's acceptable. Now, if you've got a couple thousand, obviously
Right.
you'd
Right. A
want
little
to,
bit more than that.
yeah. I mean, if you had just a personal
Right.
medicine cabinet amount.
Something else to keep in mind is to lock up your prescription drugs. You can go online and buy medicine safe. You can buy them
Mhm.
at drugstores, someplace to just lock them up. Just keep that in mind as a way to lock up anything that you have, even your Motrin and all that too.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, you can overdose on Motrin, and it's quite harmful. So please keep that in mind. And that is the last of the questions. So we've gotten through everything. And anything else you wanted to add, or something you thought of that you wanted to add at the last minute here?
No, if anybody else has any questions or comments, please. I think the contact info is on one of those first slides with my picture on it,
Okay.
and we'll get the questions, the comments, and most likely we'll get right back with you.
Okay. One more comment. Can you comment on the DEA's success with the DEA 360 initiative?
The success,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, DEA in Knoxville and Charleston, West Virginia, Knoxville, Tennessee, both are doing a phenomenal amount of outreach. I don't have any statistics on how many people they talk to, but the one in our outreach coordinator in Charleston, West Virginia, is very, very proactive. She does an outstanding job. She goes to all these schools, talks to them. Great job that she does.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here today. Again, as soon as I close this down, you will get a survey. It'll take about not even a minute to complete. I encourage you to do so. And please look for this recording in the follow-up email that you will receive 24 hours. So about 3:15 tomorrow, you'll receive the email with the recording in it. For those who are attending live today, only for those attending live, you will also receive your attendance certificate. That'll be attached. It is in a PDF attachment, so just keep an eye out for that. And with that, thank you so much, Martin and Michelle, for your help today, and for Martin for your great job on the webinar, and Emily. And we're going to go ahead and close it out for today. Until the next time, thank you.